Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, July 3rd, 2024. Final day of campaigning in Great Britain before a general election that is expected to see a change in government, from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party. Just ahead, we hear from the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, and C-SPAN's producer in London, Peter Knowles. White House and President Biden's campaign say a New York Times article claiming the president told an ally he was weighing whether to continue running for re-election is absolutely false, as the White House continues to get questions about the president's debate performance last week against former President Donald Trump. President Biden awards the Medal of Honor to two Union soldiers who, during the Civil War, were part of a mission to steal a train behind Confederate lines. They were caught and executed for what became known as the Great Locomotive Chase. Republican Congressman David Kustoff speaks to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, in Jerusalem. And the National Park Service previews the 4th of July fireworks show on the National Mall in Washington. Reuters reports that Britain's Conservative Party all but conceded election defeat to Keir Starmer's Labour on Wednesday, a day before polling stations even opened, and warned that the opposition party was on course for a record-breaking victory. Opinion polls show the center-left Labour Party is set for a big win in Thursday's vote that would end 14 years of Conservative government and hand Starmer the keys to the Prime Minister's number 10 Downing Street office on Friday morning. That story from Reuters. The party leaders have been crisscrossing Great Britain, campaigning. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was at a supermarket in Oxfordshire on Tuesday.
I know there'll be many of you who would have supported us in the past who are a bit more hesitant about doing that this time around. And I get it, right? I'm not blind to the frustrations that many of you will have. It's been a difficult few years for all of us with COVID, Ukraine, and we certainly haven't got everything absolutely right or made as much progress as we would have liked to. But on Thursday, it's not a by-election. It's not a referendum about the past. It's a really important choice about our future as a country. And the choice you make will have enormous consequences for you and your family. And I'd urge you to think very hard about it. And you would have seen all the polls and what they're saying. And if you give a blank check, or we end up collectively giving a blank check to the Labour Party, that is going to have a massive impact on you and your finances, your family, and indeed our country. And I know many of you will care about issues like making sure that we can control immigration. We won't get any progress on that. You would have seen that if you watched the TV debates the other day. Well, making sure that we invest in our security and defence, keeping everyone safe in a more uncertain world. Again, that's not what will happen under a future Labour government. Getting to net zero, which of course we all care about, and I want to get there for my two daughters, but we've got to do that in a sensible way that prioritises energy security and all of your family finances and doesn't hammer you with extra bills. Those changes I made would be reversed. And crucially, perhaps most importantly, given the few years we've had economically, it means that your taxes would go up by thousands of pounds. Right? If we give Labour that blank cheque, you won't be able to get it back, and all of you are going to end up paying much more in taxes. And I don't want to see that happen. Right? So when you think about voting on Thursday, if you vote Conservative, it is a vote for lower taxes, because I believe you will work incredibly hard, and I want you to enjoy the benefits of that hard work and keep more of your money for yourselves to spend on what you want and to spend on your families, right? That's the kind of country I believe in.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at a supermarket in Oxfordshire on Tuesday, ahead of Thursday's general election. Also Tuesday, Labour Party leader Keir Starmer was at the football club in Nottinghamshire.
This campaign is about change. It's about turning the page and rebuilding our country. And whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living crisis for months, if not years, with bills bearing down on you, whether you're a business that's been struggling locally and across the country with the damage that's been done to the economy, or whether you've served your country in uniform or in your community, this campaign is for you. The change that we're campaigning for is for you. We've got one job this summer, and that's to make it a summer of change and to have a Labour government returned on Thursday, the 4th of July. And we're able to be so positive because we have changed our Labour Party. We pushed gesture politics to one side, and we proudly say country first, party second. That is the change that we brought about in our party. That is the approach we take to this campaign, and we are asking for the opportunity to change our country for the better and put it back in the service of working people. That is what this is all about. And the contrast could not be starker. Because believe you me, if you don't vote Labour on Thursday, if you vote for the Conservatives or anybody else, then we could end up on Friday morning with 5 more years of the same. We've had 14 years of chaos and division and failure. And have you seen anything in their campaign that suggests that they've changed? I've seen chaos and division and failure. I'd add with a big N, negativity. Negativity as we go into the last 48 hours. But that's what will be back on Friday morning if we don't persuade people of the case for change.
Labour Party leader Keir Starmer on Tuesday. Peter Knowles, C-SPAN's producer in London, joins us now to talk more about the British general election on Thursday. Thanks for being with us, as always. Will there be a new Prime Minister come Friday?
Almost certainly, yes. The polls are very consistent, and to the point that the Conservative leadership have appear to have simply accepted that they're going to be beaten. I've just received in the last few minutes a message from the Conservative Party sent out to anybody who they think might be a member or a supporter, and that's because I attend their party conferences, and it's quite extraordinary. It says, you have the power, you have a voice, you have a vote, use it to stop Starmer's supermajority. So the clear implication of that is that a majority for Labour is taken for granted, and the voter is being invited to reduce that to a more decent-sized majority. So failure on the part of the Conservatives seems to be now baked into their expectations.
What have been the top issues in this campaign?
The top issues have been a question of performance. How did Conservatives perform over the last few years? And Labour successfully, in the eyes of the electorate, it would appear, blaming the Conservatives for all sorts of economic problems and the problems of the health service. The Conservatives have really pitched very clearly saying, if you vote for Labour, you'll be paying more tax, a lot more tax. So that's the clearest dividing line. But it is interesting. It's a less ideological dividing line than in some recent elections, but certainly a lot less ideological than 5 years ago between a left-wing Labour candidate and Boris Johnson, because a great many of the policies that the two largest parties are proposing are really remarkably similar. There are degrees of the emphasis that are different and how they'll get there, but there's an awful lot more in common than there is at times that pulls them apart.
When we spoke a while back as this campaign was starting, you mentioned that besides the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, the Reform Party may play a role. Are they still in a position to do that?
Yes, a huge role. One of the really big differences in this election from last time is the predecessor party to the Reform Party didn't stand against the Conservatives. Well, this time they're not only standing, but they're really going for the Conservatives, and they are led, and this came as a surprise during the course of the campaign, by their charismatic leader, Nigel Farage. Well, he became their leader when he chose to be early on in the campaign, and he's drawn a lot of support to reform. So they're doing real damage in the opinion polls to the Conservatives. I'm sure they're taking some votes from Labour too, but that's where it looks like the bulk of their support is coming. And it's it's really hampered Conservatives' ability to take on Labour and win a majority. It's been a huge factor in this campaign.
We're talking with C-SPAN's producer in London, Peter Knowles. What is campaigning like in Great Britain now? How are the messages getting out? Debates, rallies, ads, direct mail, that type of thing?
Yeah, it's been mainly conducted through fairly small-scale local events as the leaders of the two largest parties and the other party leaders dot around the country, going to constituencies that are of interest to them. The interesting thing about that is the Conservatives have been going to constituencies which have always been utterly safe, ones which in the past they would never have considered needing to campaign in. So that's a pointer to what may happen tomorrow. There have been very few big rallies, really only one really big rally, and that was Nigel Farage's. There was one rally by the Conservatives just yesterday when Boris Johnson turned up and he made a barnstorming speech, though not on the same platform as current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The two badly fell out over Boris Johnson's departure from office. So there haven't been many big events. And in fact, travelling around, one thing you notice is there is a lack of excitement about this election, even if it's heading for a landslide. There aren't that many posters up in the street, very few posters. Of course, there's a lot of action on social media, as you would expect. But this isn't a campaign that seems to have convulsed the nation, not at all.
How much does the individual candidate matter in each constituency, what we would call here districts, or do people mostly vote the national party platform?
Yes, they do tend to vote according to national leanings. There's a small advantage in each district or constituency for the local candidate, but that advantage has been greatly eroded this time for the Conservatives because so many of their MPs decided not to stand this time, to retire or to seek other opportunities, other careers. And so a great many of them were leaving anyway. So that personal vote that you would expect to follow doesn't exist in many cases.
Have there been any surprises in this campaign? It's lasted 6 weeks.
The biggest surprise is the one I alluded to, which was Nigel Farage deciding to stand. That really made a terrific difference. Labour have been very cautious in what they've said. They've been deliberately ticking the box for no surprises here, please, because they've been sitting consistently on such a big poll lead. I suppose the other surprise is just how badly Rishi Sunak has campaigned. He did a very good job in the final TV election debate, but there's so many missteps from the atrocious announcement of the campaign, looking like a drowned rat in Downing Street. His departure early from the D-Day commemorations in France, which was noticed, and his inability to do anything to mitigate the problem that arose when it turned out that of his inner circle, there were people placing bets on the date of the election in the 2 or 3 days before it was announced, when it looked like there would be inside information knocking around. And that really shocked the public, because they thought, well, does that mean that our politicians really are just grabbing what they can for themselves? So that was a nasty surprise for the Conservatives.
Peter Knowles, C-SPAN's producer in London, joining us from London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter Knowles will be interviewed on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program on Friday, talking about the results of the British election. Washington Journal starts 7 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN radio and television. And now to the U.S. presidential election. The New York Times reporting that Donald J. Trump's lead in the 2024 presidential race has widened after President Biden's fumbling debate performance last week, as concerns about Mr. Biden is too old to govern effectively rose to new heights among Democrats and independent voters, a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College showed. Mr. Trump now leads Mr. Biden 49% to 43% among likely voters nationally, a 3-point swing toward the Republican from just a week earlier before the debate. And another New York Times article today reads, President Biden has told a key ally that he knows he may not be able to salvage his candidacy if he cannot convince the public in the coming days that he's up to the job after a disastrous debate performance last week. The president, whom this ally emphasized is still deeply in the fight for re-election, understands that his next few appearances heading into the holiday weekend must go well. New York Times quotes Andrew Bates, a White House spokesman, saying the report was absolutely false and the White House had not been given enough time to respond. Quentin Folks, spokesperson for the Biden-Harris re-election campaign, responded on CNN today.
I do want to get your take, first of all, on this new reporting from Katie Rogers that the president has told a key ally he knows he may not be able to salvage his candidacy if he can't convince the public in the coming days he is up for the job. What is being discussed in the campaign right now about this?
Well, first of all, good morning, Erica. Thank you for having me on the show. Look, that is false. There are a number of rumors floating out there. The president is in this race to win it. He is the Democratic nominee. And from our perspective, we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that we're building a campaign apparatus to reach voters.
So when you say that's false, the president has had zero conversations with anyone saying, I may not be able to continue, I may not be able to win this race.
That is correct. The president has been having conversations with a number of Democratic leaders. I'm talking to them. I think, obviously, the president, in his own words, acknowledged a poor debate performance. But at the same time, I think what we're sensing from people is a sense of urgency and fear from Donald Trump. And I think that the conversations that the president has been having with Democrats across the country is one to reassure them that he is in this race, that he knows that he needs to reassure the American people, and that our campaign is going to continue to build and scale to win in November.
Biden-Harris campaign spokesperson Quentin Folks on CNN. White House Director of Political Strategy and Outreach for the president, Emmy Ruiz, posting on X a quote attributed to President Biden. I am running. I am the leader of the Democratic Party. No one is pushing me out. I've been knocked down before and counted out my whole life. When you get knocked down, you get back up. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre opened her news conference today by saying the president has spoken with the Democratic congressional leaders and will meet tonight with Democratic governors. She then answered reporters' questions about the president's debate.
The president has connected with Leader Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Representative Clyburn, former Speaker Pelosi, and Senator Coons. Today, President Biden taped 2 Black radio interviews that will air tomorrow morning. One is with Earl Ingram on Civic Media Network, which airs across Wisconsin, and one with Andrea Lawful Sanders on WURD's The Source in Philadelphia. And as Governor Walz of Minnesota announced today, the president will meet with more than 20 Democratic governors. Now, as you know, these governors are some of our closest partners when it comes to creating jobs, building new roads and building bridges and so much more. And so the president certainly looks forward to meeting with them. And with that, I am happy to take your questions. Sung Min.
Last night at the fundraiser, the president blamed jet lag for his debate performance, but he was back stateside for well over a week. So does he really need more than a week and a half to recover from traveling in Europe? And is that really what he thinks caused his poor debate performance?
So, yeah, just a couple of things, and I do appreciate the question because the president has certainly spoken to this many times about the debate, and so he had an opportunity to do that in front of supporters, and as you just stated, he did that. He talked about, he owned that the debate was not his best night, and he said himself, it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I was standing here yesterday, and many people were asking why and what's the explanation. And that's what you heard from him. Look, the two, I think, in addition to the 2 major trips, he was also continued to do his presidential duties. He worked late in doing that, and he also prepared for the debate. And on top of that, there was obviously the jet lag, as you just asked about, and also he had a cold. And you all heard directly, you heard from him during the debate. He had a hoarse voice. Many of you reached out to me and my team and some other members of the White House asking what was going on. We confirmed that he had a cold. And so I think those 2 things, continuing obviously to do his duties as commander-in-chief, as the president. And so I think some of you here in this room can certainly relate to, what could happen when you're having an important moment and you're not feeling well, and also you wish you could have done better. And so he took ownership. I think that's important. And he's going to continue to make a strong case for his agenda, and that's what you're going to see. And he was given an explanation, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to get that out there and for people to hear directly from him, as he has been doing since Friday of last week.
It just seems like I know you're calling it an explanation, not an excuse, but it does seem like there are new excuses since the debate of what went wrong there.
I would say I don't think it's a new excuse. I think some of your colleagues reached out to us about the schedule. Some of your colleagues asked if the schedule was too strenuous or was it because of the jet lag, and so we are laying out and explaining exactly what happened. You heard from the president, you've heard from me, and it was indeed a schedule where the president traveled 6 time zones forward to G7 in Italy, 9 time zones back to LA, and 3 time zones forward again to DC. That's something that one of the print pooler on that day laid out for all of you and those who read the pool notes, and on top of that, he did have a cold. So it is an explanation. I don't think it is an addition. I don't think it's. We certainly don't want to explain this away. But you all asked me for an explanation yesterday. The president gave that directly yesterday to his supporters. He wanted to make sure, knowing that all of you would get that information as he's speaking to his supporters last night.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference at the White House. New York Times reporter Tim Bulk posting on X, Representative Raul Grijalva of Arizona has become the second House Democrat to call on President Biden to leave the race. Grijalva said in an interview, "If he's the candidate, I'm going to support him. But I think this is an opportunity to look elsewhere. What he needs to do is shoulder the responsibility for keeping that seat. And part of that responsibility is to get out of this race." Story from the Washington Examiner. House Republicans are vowing to ramp up attacks against Vice President Kamala Harris as some Democrats warm to the idea of her replacing President Joe Biden on the 2024 presidential ticket. The National Republican Congressional Committee released a new ad Wednesday targeting Harris in the case that Democrats replace Biden as the party's nominee before November. The ad accuses Harris of being the enabler-in-chief, citing Biden's border policies, and argues the vice president deserves partial blame for the most unpopular decisions the Biden administration has made over the last 3 years. The ad highlights moments in which Biden is seen tripping or appearing confused while on stage, accusing Democrats of being complicit in convincing voters he is mentally fit to run for a second term. That story from the Washington Examiner. Congressman Roger Williams, Republican from Texas, talked about the presidential race between Democrat Joe Biden and Republican Donald Trump today on the Mark Davis Show, KSKY Radio in Dallas.
Well, I thought President Trump did a really good job during the debate. I thought he was presidential. He had answers. He did what he needed to do. And, of course, we know President Biden showed some lack of strength. And, I'm not concerned much about his age, but it's about mental capacity. And the Democrats are trying to make this thing political on who can they name to replace him. But the fact of the matter is, I think the question is, who's running America? That's what bothers me. I mean, who is it? I mean, is it Clinton? Is it Obama? Are the Chinese? Who's running America? So that's the question. But I thought we did well, and the Democrats are trying to decide who's going to run. They got a vice president. I don't know why they have to look so far past her, which they are. But I think that people are waking up and they want policy that is less government and more power to the people and cut taxes, keep more money, keep more of your paycheck. And I think we're on the right track right now.
If indeed a president who is this infirm creates a question about whether he should be the candidate, it also certainly creates a question as to whether he should even be president. Is it too much? Is it too harsh to say that what really needs to be under the magnifying glass is whether or not he should just flat out resign?
Well, I think that's the question. I mean, like I said earlier, it shouldn't be political. It should be who's best to run America. He's not running America. He's not capable of that. Again, it's not his age, it's his mental capacity. So I think that's the question, is who is running our country, and it needs to be really fixed now. There is a Vice President Harris. Maybe they find out she's the one to move ahead until the election. But America is not in a good shape right now. And I think when you watch that, Mark, you kind of joke about his situation, talk about Trump, this and that. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, you had Putin was watching that, Xi was watching that, the world was watching that, and it showed how weak we really are. And I think that's a dangerous position for us right now.
Congressman Roger Williams, Republican from Texas, on the Mark Davis radio show out of Dallas. President Biden had one public event today at the White House. Associated Press writes he awarded the Medal of Honor for conspicuous gallantry to 2 Union soldiers who stole a locomotive deep in Confederate territory during the Civil War and drove it north for 87 miles as they destroyed railroad tracks and telegraph lines.
The very first recipients of the Medal of Honor were a small band known as Andrews Raiders, named for a spy for the Union Army, James Andrews, who led one of the most daring operations in the entire Civil War. Every soldier who joined that mission was awarded the Medal of Honor, except for 2 soldiers who died because of that operation but never received this recognition. Today, we right that wrong. Today, they finally received the recognition they deserve. Private George Wilson, born in Belmont County, Ohio. In his early 30s, not long after the Civil War began, he enlisted in the Union Army. He joined the 2nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment. He was a father, mechanic, and he was a hell of a debater. He always was ready to persuade, argue, and as one family member put it, dress anyone down if the need be. Private Philip Shadrach, born in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. By the time he was a teenager, Philip was an orphan, a laborer, did everything he could to get by. And from what we know, he was a free spirit, always searching for adventure, excitement, intrigue. In his early 20s, Philip enlisted, joining the Ohio regiment that George did, the same one. With us today are members of those families. Teresa Chandler, George's great-great-granddaughter, Gerald Taylor, Philip's great-grandnephew. They shared with us how the stories of their brave ancestors were passed down to families for generation after generation. For Philip and George and their brothers in arms, serving our country meant serving our country, fighting and even dying to preserve the Union and the sacred values it was founded upon: freedom, justice, fairness, unity. George and Philip were willing to shed their blood to make these ideals real.
President Biden at the White House, he went on to talk about how Philip Shadrach and George Wilson were captured, tried as spies, convicted, and sentenced to be executed.
And that fateful day came as they approached the gallows. Philip and George stood tall. A crowd gathered around them. Private Wilson turned to face the crowd, summoned the ultimate measure of grace. And according to reports from that day, this is what he said. He looked at the crowd and he said he believed they were wrong, but he did not harbor hostility toward the people of the South. He said it was not them, but their leaders who were responsible for the rebellion. And he said the time would come when the Union would be restored and the American flag would wave over the entire nation once again. Ladies and gentlemen, until the very end, George and Philip believed in the United States of America, the only nation on earth founded on an idea. Every other nation in the history of the world is based on geography, ethnicity, religion, or some other attribute. But we're the only nation founded on an idea. That idea is where all men are created equal, deserve to be treated equally throughout their lives. We haven't always lived up to that, but like George and Philip, we've never walked away from it either. Their heroic deeds went unacknowledged for over a century, but time did not erase their valor. And they want to fight for what they fought for and they died, just as precious today as it was then. Unity over disunion. Freedom over subjugation. Progress over retreat. Truth over lies.
President Biden at a Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979, we've been your primary source for Capitol Hill, providing balanced, unfiltered coverage of government, taking you to where the policies debated and decided, all with the support of America's cable companies. C-SPAN, 45 years and counting, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. It's free and wherever you find your podcasts. Jewish Insider writes that the first ever Knesset-House Parliamentary Friendship Group held its inaugural meeting in Jerusalem on Tuesday with its American chairman, Congressman David Kustoff, Republican from Tennessee, and Israeli members of the Knesset, Boaz Bismuth and Idan Roll, as well as Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana in attendance. The theme running through the event was shared democratic values between Israel and the U.S. and the need to protect those values from enemies who seek to destroy them. An article from Jewish Insider. Here's part of Congressman Kustoff's speech.
There's no doubt that the United States and Israel are united by an unbreakable bond. Our friendship is forged by the belief that democracy is the only form of government that can ensure that all men and women have the basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But today, we are facing a threat of greater magnitude than just killing and destruction. We are facing a rebuke of Western culture and values, a rejection of a free and liberated society, a direct attack on morality, on truth, on reason, and on goodwill. We are fighting an enemy that strives to catapult democracy as a form of government and frankly seeks to eliminate Israel. What we are fighting is barbaric terrorism. We are combating a global enemy. Back home, as you mentioned, Mr. Speaker, my country is currently celebrating 248 years since our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence and proclaimed the 13 colonies free from foreign rule. In the years that followed, America's allies stood by us in our fight for survival. Without our allies and without our friends, I don't know if the United States would be here today. America's first president, George Washington, described true friendship as something that, quote, must undergo and withstand the shocks of adversity. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, the relationship between the United States and Israel, it is a true friendship. It's one that is rooted not only in our shared values, but also in our willingness to protect those values in the face of adversity.
Congressman David Kustoff, Republican from Tennessee, speaking to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, in Jerusalem, at the launch of the Knesset-House Parliamentary Friendship Group. Congressman Kustoff pointed out that he is one of two Jewish Republicans in the House and Senate. The other is Congressman Max Miller of Ohio. Turning to Russia's war against Ukraine, two articles from Bloomberg. The White House announced a $2.3 billion arms package for Ukraine that includes equipment from Pentagon inventories and long-term contracts for air defense weapons with Lockheed Martin Corporation and RTX Corporation. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Donald Trump should come forward with his plan to quickly end the war with Russia, warning that any proposal must avoid violating the nation's sovereignty. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre spoke about the new aid package during today's White House briefing.
So I want to begin by sharing that Biden-Harris administration is announcing a significant new security assistance package for Ukraine as the United States continues to support Ukraine's defense against Russia's invasion. This announcement is the 7th security assistance package that President Biden has authorized to help Ukraine since he signed the National Security Supplemental in April. It includes missiles for Ukraine's air defense systems, ammunition for high-mobility artillery, rocket systems, artillery rounds, and other critical capabilities that are being drawn down from U.S. stocks using presidential drawdown authorities. It also includes new funding that the Department of Defense will use to purchase interceptors for Patriot and NASAM air defense systems to help Ukraine defend its troops and its cities against Russia's aerial attacks. The United States' support over the last few months has been critical in helping Ukraine defend their territory against Russia's advances. Thanks to the bravery of the Ukrainian forces and weapons deliveries from the United States and our allies and partners, it is increasingly clear the Russian offensive around Kharkiv has been a failure. And as President Biden has been clear, we are committed to continuing to stand with Ukraine until they prevail against Russian aggression.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, during her briefing at the White House, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a Bloomberg TV interview that if former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential likely nominee this year, believes he knows how to end the war between Russia and Ukraine in one day, he should give the details.
So let us imagine that the winner might be Trump in November, and he knows how to end the war. He has a plan. Me, as the president of a country at war, not a theoretical person, but a real-life person, I would like to be prepared. We are 40 million. We're a big country, and we really depend on the aid from the world. And we depend on the aid and the position and the stance of the U.S. So I would like to understand, what would it mean to finish war fast? Tomorrow, do we want the war to be over tomorrow? The war didn't to start. It was Putin who started it. But I hope you agree that it would be fair. If Trump knows how to end this war, he should tell us today, because if there are risks to Ukraine's independence, if there are risks that we will lose the statehood, we want to be prepared for this. We want to understand whether in November we will have the powerful support of the US or we'll be all alone.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky interviewed on Bloomberg TV. Russian President Vladimir Putin, writes Al Jazeera, and Chinese leader Xi Jinping have hailed their country's partnership on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a regional security bloc founded by the duo as a counterpoint to Western might. Speaking on the sidelines of the summit in Kazakhstan on Wednesday, both Putin and Xi commended the group's expanding membership, which includes the Central Asian countries, as well as India, Iran, and member-in-waiting Belarus. They also continued to portray the China-Russian relationship as a stabilizing force in chaotic times. That article from Al Jazeera. Wall Street today, the Dow down 23, NASDAQ up 159, S&P up 28. Tomorrow is the 4th of July holiday, marking the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776, by the Second Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia. Congress made July 4th a holiday in 1870, although the Library of Congress says celebrations have been happening since the first anniversary. The Mississippi congressional delegation got into the spirit a day early by reading the Declaration of Independence. You'll hear Senators Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde-Smith, and House members Benny Thompson, Trent Kelly, Michael Guest, and Mike Ezell.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impelled them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states.
That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Mississippi's bipartisan congressional delegation, Senators Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde-Smith, both Republicans, along with House member Benny Thompson, a Democrat, and Republicans Trent Kelly, Michael Guest, and Mike Eazell, in a video reciting the Declaration of Independence. One of the highlights of the 4th of July holiday in the Washington, D.C. metro area for many is the fireworks on the National Mall. Mike Litterist, Chief of Communications for the National Mall and Memorial Parks for the National Park Service, talked about what those who are planning to go should know.
What everyone waits for all day long is the fireworks display. Starts this year at 9:09:30, a very specific timing so that we can coordinate for the Capitol 4th broadcast. A 17.5-minute show produced once again this year by Garden State Fireworks, who have produced, I believe this is their 10th year in a row of producing the show. For folks that are coming down, they will find the setup and the footprint very similar to previous years. There will be a secure area from 14th Street to Lincoln Memorial. That area will open at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The area from 14th Street east to the Capitol, that is open for anyone who wants to come out. There is no bag check, and that is not a secure area. As always, we encourage folks that are coming down, make use of public transportation. Parking and traffic are difficult on the best of days. With the road closures in place, with the security box, it would be almost impossible to get close to the mall. Make use of Metro. Metro is offering free rides after 5 p.m. And maybe suggest that look for stops other than Smithsonian National Mall that may be a little bit less crowded, have a little bit more of a walk, but have fewer people there. So L'Enfant Plaza, Federal Triangle, if you're coming down from towards the Lincoln Memorial area, Foggy Bottom, George Washington University. We are expecting high heat on Thursday. I think the forecast right now is high of about 95. By the middle of the afternoon, heat index around 100. So we want to make sure everybody who comes down prepares for the heat. Hydrate all day long. Start taking that water in before you get here. Bring water with you. Make sure that you're drinking water throughout the day. Apply sunscreen, coverings, use shade when you can. Everything to get yourself out of the heat. Smithsonian museums are open in the afternoon. Take advantage of their free air conditioning in the heat of the day before you come out and grab that spot for the fireworks. And for visitors who are coming with small kids, we encourage take a photograph of them before you leave that day. So in the event you get separated, we do have a family reunification area that the Park Police is operating, but you'll have a photograph of what they're wearing that day and make it easier to find.
Mike Litteris, Chief of Communications for the National Mall and Memorial Parks for the National Park Service, at a news conference on Tuesday. Before the fireworks on the 4th of July on Thursday, there will also be the National Independence Day Parade along Constitution Avenue and the Capitol 4th concert on the west lawn of the U.S. Capitol building, which will feature this year Smokey Robinson celebrating the 65th anniversary of Motown. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.